News, Jill Sorella. Come on over.
Thank you for coming here tonight. We are very, very excited. This is our first town hall meeting, and it's really important to us, and we're so glad that you're here for the evening with us. We hope you'll get a lot out of it, and hopefully we'll be able to do more and bring more of these types of things to you. I want to recognize our staff, our engineers and our anchors, and all of our engineers and camera people that have worked really a lot of extra and overtime, and our people from our corporate headquarters that do a lot of here, Thank you very much for coming. But it is you that's going to make this all happen, and we're just pleased that we meet you. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Jill. Also, one last item, if you have a cell phone, don't turn it off, but if you'd silence it, I'd appreciate it. So silence your cell phone. Again, welcome you to engage in social media. And you know, I gave a warning to everybody in the back row a few minutes ago. You didn't move on your own, so now I'm going to say, come on down. This is like church. This is like school. I want you down close to me. I want to see all these beautiful faces. Come on, back row. Let's go. Come on, fill it up front. Come on, people. If not, I'm going to have a camera right on you the whole time. Come on down.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Come on down. Let's fill in the front rows.
Linda Fletcher.
Lots of spaces up
Linda
here.
Fletcher, testing this microphone.
Hey, this is my job.
I
If
don't
you
know the
fill it in,
Jabberwocky, so
don't
I
have a
can't
job.
help you with that.
Come on down.
Lieutenant Colonel, retired.
In fact, there should be nobody
little old lady.
seated behind the camera operators. We got plenty of seats up front. Come on down.
What? Okay.
You want? We're about 3 minutes. How far are we?
4 minutes.
All right, 4 minutes out, everyone. So come on down. Nobody should be seated behind the cameras. Nobody should. This side of the cameras, please.
Yes, I can.
Sir,
I can talk
the handsome man in
pointing
the
at
lime
me
green
and
shirt,
wants me
come
to
on
talk.
down.
But I have no,
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
no poetic abilities.
Come on down. Come on down. Yeah. I said
Provide him with a
good-looking guy.
mic
Come
check
on
that
down.
you can.
Neil O'Donnell.
I'll have,
Everybody in the back row,
licensed
come on down.
psychologist.
We got seats up
Unfortunately,
front,
don't have
please.
much,
Come on down.
Very artistic or literate to say. Hopefully, I'll be able to come up with something helpful later on.
Okay.
Okay, they need to have you talk a little bit.
Dr. Shea, he took his vorpal sword.
All right, by a show of hands again. By a show of hands again, who knows they have a question they want to ask tonight?
Did he by the tum-tum tree and stood
Okay.
a while and
So this young lady's my
as
first,
an
you're my
officer
second.
thought, he
See how
stood
easy it
the
is?
Jabberwock with
And I'll be
eyes
over on the other
gleaming
side
and
shortly.
whistling through, but told you would, and burbled as it came. 1, 2.
All right, we're 3 minutes out from going
Through, the
live.
vocal
That'll be,
blade
the
went
package will run for about a minute and a half,
He left
and
it
then
dead,
I'll
and with
talk,
its head, he went
Mark and Kristen will
galumphing
talk,
back.
and then it's
Welcome to 7 and 4 News' Your Voice, Your Future Town Hall.
Our topic tonight is post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD.
Most people will experience at least one traumatic event in their life that could lead to the development of post-traumatic stress disorder.
In fact, PTSD affects more than 5 million adults in a given year. We've assembled a panel of experts and studio audience at Millikan Auditorium on the campus of Northwestern Michigan College to discuss the causes, symptoms, effects, and treatments of PTSD. Dr. Jonathan Shea is a psychiatrist specializing in PTSD. He was a staff psychiatrist at the Department of Veterans Affairs Outpatient Center in Boston, where his only patients were combat veterans with severe psychological injuries. Dr. Shea has written and lectured on a variety of topics relating to veterans for decades. Linda Fletcher is a retired Army nurse with a master's in trauma nursing who's been involved in an independent study of post-traumatic stress disorder for the last 8 years. Linda is the founder and executive director of A Matter of Honor.
Dr. Neil O'Donnell, a licensed clinical psychologist, has been in private practice for more than 20 years. He's specialized in treating trauma for more than half of his career. Dr. O'Donnell uses EMDR and body-based approaches to help those suffering from PTSD. Jacqueline Cashel is executive director of Peace Ranch. Peace Ranch is a center for experiential growth and learning where rescued, rehabilitated horses and licensed professionals help people deal with a broad range of challenges, including PTSD.
If you want to comment or ask a question tonight, you can do so by heading to our Facebook fan page. Just search for UpNorthLive. You can also reach us through Twitter. Just use the hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture, or you can email us at newsroom@upnorthlive.com. Mark and I will be reading your comments and using your questions throughout the town hall.
Now we turn it over to our moderator tonight, Mark Hyman from Sinclair Broadcasting and host of Behind the Headlines.
Just about any day you can see someone who has suffered the physical injuries from combat. We see the burns, the scars, the missing limbs. Sometimes there are wounds that run much deeper. They're not visible to the naked eye. Good evening, I'm Mark Hyman, host of Behind the Headlines and tonight's moderator. For some, the biggest challenges take place off the battlefield, after the guns have gone silent. These are the wounds that damage the soul. Tonight, we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, we've got a live audience here, anxious to get started, but as Mark and Kristen had mentioned, you at home can join us in this great discussion. So we want to hear from you because a question we ask live on air may be yours. Now, we've assembled a terrific panel of experts. You've already heard who they are. But for those of you who want to join us at home, the details we're going to get from both Mark and Kristen, they're manning our social media desk. They'll tell you how you can join the discussion. Mark, Kristen?
All right, thanks, Mark, and good evening. Tonight we have assembled a panel of experts that have a tremendous amount of information that you can turn to, but we're really hoping tonight is a two-way street. We have a rare and unique opportunity to make your voice be so powerful, to have your voice be heard. If you have a question that you would like answered, if you have a concern that you would like addressed, or if you or a loved one has experience with PTSD, we would like to hear from you.
And it's really easy to make your voice heard. You can do so on Facebook or Twitter. If you have a question or a comment about PTSD, go ahead and ask it on Twitter. Just use the hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture. You can also head to our Facebook page. Just search for UpNorthLive and ask it right there. Mark and I will be moderating all of those comments, and you could hear your question asked live. Mark?
Thanks, Kristen. Mark? Well, this is a town hall. It's all about the public asking questions of our panel of experts. We're going to start this evening off with the first question, not from the audience, but from me, and it's going to go to our live audience here. I'd like you to respond with the sound of applause. Your two choices and answers are yes and no. Please respond to this statement. Our country should be doing more to assist our nation's military veterans. Those who believe yes, please applaud. If you believe no, please applaud. Didn't expect to hear any no's. I want to put the same question to our panel of experts by a show of hands. Should we be doing more to assist our military veterans? If you believe yes, please raise your hand. Come over here, Johnny. All right, well, it's certainly unanimous in the room, please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
I'm Diane Jones. I'm a military veteran. I was in the Army. I've got a PTSD claim. And the only reason I come here because I was invited to, I had this survey. And I just had questions about it.
All right, well, what specific question do you have about the survey? We don't have anyone in the panel from the VA, although we do have people in the audience from the VA, but is there something specific that we can answer for you?
About like filling this out, stuff like that. I just didn't understand.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we will have someone here from the VA work with you, and we will help you get that filled out this evening. Does that work out great for you? All right, thank you for joining us. And gentlemen in the front row, if you would join me up here, please. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name is Richard Edmonds. I'm from Gaylord, Michigan. And my question is whether the expanded use of the term PTSD for non-military purposes, I guess, whether that's affecting the treatment for veterans with PTSD.
Let's go to Jonathan.
This is a naughty question. I am one of the people that went with General Pete Corelli from the Army and General Romeo Dallaire from Canadian Forces to the American Psychiatric Association to just get them to change the name post-traumatic stress disorder to post-traumatic stress injury to make it less stigmatizing for military people. It's entirely honorable to be injured in the service of your country, but to fall ill or get a disease or sickness or malady, it's not dishonorable, but it sure is unlucky, and that's stigmatizing in that world.
Well, let me follow up with Neil, because part of the question was we know of people in the military who suffer from PTSD, but there are other people who can be victims of PTSD, everything from sexual traumas to, well, in fact, in a moment we're going to have an audience member talk about what he's witnessed. But can you share some background of what would cause PTSD with an individual?
Well, anytime anyone is in a life-threatening situation or something that counts as social death, they can be psychologically injured. PTSD, narrowly defined, is a set of adaptations to that kind of threat situation. It's when it persists after the threat has passed.
Let me follow up with Jackie. In your organization, do you deal with individuals who are not from the military who suffer from PTSD, or does your organization just deal with veterans?
We actually work with both. We work with veterans with PTSD, and we also work with children who have been abused and neglected. We work with women who have been raped. So we work with people from all kinds of situations that have PTSD.
Well, let's explore this a little further, because I have standing next to me someone who certainly has witnessed a lot of trauma and tragedy over a number of years. Will you please tell us who you are, where you live, what you do, and then let's chat about PTSD.
Sure. I'm Pat Parker. I'm the fire chief of the Grand Traverse Metro Fire Department here in Traverse City, and been in the line of work for about 31 years. And we're seeing PTSD in the forefront now in the fire service, police, fire, EMS, sometimes 10 times the rate of the general public. One of the questions I have for the panel would be, how do you get, in my case, a firefighter to open up and say that they're hurting? I mean, so often they're the macho ones that are out helping people. They shouldn't be someone that needs help.
Let me ask Linda to come into this conversation, because we chatted about this before the show, the male culture, testosterone, and every guy wants to be 10 feet tall and bulletproof. It's a challenge to get them to open up about what affects them when it's not a physical injury, but involves other issues.
Well, it primarily has to do with men, there's no question about that, but PTSD is not limited to the male population. In fact, the dictionary, or the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, tells us that 8% of the population of America has PTSD. As far as how you get someone to talk about it, I mean, that is really at the heart of PTSD. It's very crucial to be able to speak about it, but holding it in is what creates the issue and what makes it grow. So finding an outlet is very, very important. And I think that we are beginning
We hope one of the benefits of tonight's discussion is to help remove the stigma so that men loaded with testosterone, feeling 10 feet tall and bulletproof, can come forward and seek the help they need. Let's go back to the studio audience. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
I'm Amy Salvo. I'm new to the area. I live in Traverse City. And this is for Jacqueline. I was pretty interested in using such a gentle technique as horses and interaction with that. And I was wondering what kind of responses you get in the children and how quickly.
The responses really for children or adults are very fast. The equine-assisted psychotherapy is considered a brief approach, and that's because one of our veterans, in fact, said it's like therapy on warp speed. And so typically for children, we see them 4 to 6 sessions, and we see significant improvement in that time.
All right, we're back to the studio audience, but after this, I'm going to have to check in with our viewers at home because we've started this event about 15 minutes ago, but we've had people weighing in all week long with questions on social media. But before we go to social media, let's check in with this gentleman. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
Okay, my name is Satya Pillay. I'm from Traverse City originally. Currently, I'm downstate. I'm in my last year of medical school, and my question is, I'm going to be a family physician in less than a year, and I'm wondering what you believe our role should be in treating PTSD.
Jonathan?
Well, job number one for every health professional, everyone, no matter what your discipline, is sleep. Get the sleep right, enough of it and good quality. That's job one. And this isn't a call for more pill pushers because every health discipline has a good tool bag for sleep. Everyone.
Anything to add, Neil?
Sure. Medical personnel, family physicians, are in a great position to identify PTSD and to make appropriate referrals. The most important thing that I want to convey to the family doctors in town, the physicians I work with, is to ask questions, to be on the lookout, have eyes and ears open for signs of stress that are happening at home, and to be willing to ask questions that are sometimes uncomfortable but are important, about whether people feel safe, about whether they're getting their emotional needs met, whether it feels like home is dangerous, alcohol use, whether people are being hit or pushed or scared at home. Those are questions that give you lots of information and begin to move you toward being able to identify PTSD where it lives.
And I want to follow up, and I'm going to ask your opinion, Linda, on something, because in this day and age, we're asking schools, as an example, to keep an eye out for things like concussion symptoms. But is there value, perhaps, in talking to certain school officials to keep an eye out for PTSD symptoms? You know, and certainly walking the fine line, because we don't want to create an invasive process where school officials are currently calling officials all the time, complaining about or reporting or turning in. But is there a way perhaps to sensitize those people who look for what we see in PTSD in children or in, of course, coworkers?
You know, I'm so glad you asked me that. The organization, A Matter of Honor, that's associated with this event exists for the purpose of teaching Americans about PTSD. And it is our belief that it not only needs to be recognized in the school systems, it needs to be taught. Because Americans really don't know about PTSD. We don't understand it. We are exposed to a lot of hype and drama that teaches us how to fear our veterans. What we need is information so we can once again learn to revere them. So we believe wholeheartedly in education being aware of the need to disseminate that information and for it to be incorporated in the classrooms, in the high schools, as well as in the colleges.
And a quick follow-up with Jonathan, because those of us who are laymen tend to think in terms of looking for warning signs, behaviors in someone who suffers from PTSD. Is it possible to see indicators in the family members of those suffering from PTSD?
It's a terrible thing to contemplate, but trauma is catching. That if there is a family member who has been severely traumatized, whether it's by sexual violence or being to war and being traumatized there, it's a communicable disease, and you see an intergenerational transmission. I don't want to pretend that I could instruct you as to the signs in children, because they are somewhat different than in adults. And I'd rather leave that to someone with the knowledge that I don't have. All my patients have been Vietnam combat veterans, no children.
We're about 20 minutes into this event. We've already had some very strong questions, some very good information we got from our panelists, but even though we started 20 minutes ago here, this started about a week and a half ago at home. Viewers have been weighing in on this issue for several days. So let's go to our social media desk. Mark, Kristen, what do you have for us?
Thanks, Mark. We are starting to get a lot of questions on our UpNorthLive Facebook page, as well as a lot of questions and comments on Twitter using that hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture.
That's right. And one of the things that we've actually seen over the last week is expressed by Beth. She posted on our Facebook page, PTSD is not just for veterans. I've had abuse as a child. I have PTSD. And she says, this has changed my life. Elizabeth on our Facebook page posted, wish I could learn more. I have a granddaughter raising her and has PTSD since 15 years of age. From mental and verbal abuse, people are affected in all different ways. She says, it is very difficult at times. Bill is a veteran from Kingsley. He reached out to us on our UpNorthLive Facebook page. He wrote, thank goodness we are finally getting closer to being able to talk openly about PTSD. Too many of us returned home and felt like we needed to be tough. I hope our new veterans don't feel that way.
We also have a question from Richard. He lives in Traverse City, and he asked this question on our Facebook page. He said, what do we say to veterans who are afraid to ask employers for time away to deal with PTSD? I fortunately work for the federal government, who has been gracious with time away, but fellow veterans have not been so lucky.
That's a great question from Richard. I want to ask Jackie, since you've dealt with individuals who suffer from PTSD, have they shared with you some of their concerns about how they communicate with their employers to get the time available to seek treatment, if it's therapeutic treatment or medical treatment? Have you had those conversations at all?
Actually, this is a really difficult problem for our veterans, and employers are not very sympathetic, and so it's difficult to hold a job. And it becomes very discouraging and just encourages the feelings of powerlessness and persecution in their own country.
And I want to follow up with Jonathan, because one of the symptoms we see with PTSD is depression. Can you just chat a little bit about how that affects someone and how it can be part of a downward spiral?
Well, without trying to put too fine a point on it, one of the crucial consequences of moral injury from war is despair, where people feel they have lost any capacity for virtue. It never happened, gone. And it is in that state that people often kill themselves. And there is, as people know, a prodigious rate of suicide among psychologically and morally injured veterans.
Well, and I want to bring Linda back in the conversation, because in 2012, the Veterans Administration released a report in which it claimed that there were 22 veterans committing suicide every single day, which is about 8,000 a year. Certainly, depression is such a nasty ingredient that leads to depression. What can a veteran do, and what are some of the options that he or she have in order to seek that treatment, or even to get the information and the diagnosis that they're suffering from something? It's just not that I'm a bad person and life is terrible.
That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. And I don't think that all of that responsibility is incumbent on the veteran. I think it's incumbent as much on our population as it is on our veterans to be able to identify it. Some of them hide it so well that, it's not possible to see. But certainly, we need to be sensitive to it and to be able to look for signs and symptoms. And veterans themselves need more education about it. They need to understand that they are subject to it. They need to understand what kinds of things they can look for in themselves, and they need to know those things before they are released from active duty.
We're back to the studio audience. Sir, please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name is Stephen Brown. I'm from Kalkaska. I'm a disabled veteran from combat operations in Iraq. I do have PTSD. My question is to the doctors. We do have in the system of the VA residential treatment and outpatient treatment in different categories and things that they've structured together. What I would like from the panel is some positive comments on veterans that want to go into residential treatment as opposed to getting it on an outpatient basis, specifically being around the camaraderie of other combat veterans and the med path and other things of that nature. So any comment would be appreciated.
I'll start with Jonathan, because you worked at the Boston VA for a period of time, correct?
Peers are the most important factor in recovery from severe combat trauma, particularly moral injury. Peers are life-saving, and I want to emphasize that, at least in my view, people with all the alphabet salad after their name are nowhere near as valuable and effective to a psychologically and morally injured veteran as other veterans who've walked in their shoes. And in my view, my highest and best use is as a stagehand, to get the lights on, sweep out the gum wrappers, get the curtain up. But I don't belong on the stage. Veterans do, and they do the heavy lifting with each other and do it very, very well. So peers, 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 peers.
Neil, something to add?
The question was directly about inpatient treatment, and I can't speak directly to that, but I will say that as Dr. Shea has indicated, the more you can talk to someone who's been in your own situation, and whether that's combat veterans talking to other combat veterans, whether that's women who've been in domestic violence situations talking to other women who've been in domestic violence situations, children who've struggled with physical or sexual abuse, being able to talk to other kids about what their experiences have been. It's tremendously healing.
This is a good time for me to ask my next snap poll question of the evening. I'd like the audience here to respond to the sound of applause. Your two choices and answers are yes and no. Please respond to this statement. Changing the culture so that veterans will not feel ashamed, embarrassed, or believe they have failed if they ask for help is an important first step to treating PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and similar illnesses. Those who believe yes, please applaud. I'm guessing no one's going to say no, but anyone who says no, please applaud. So I guess we're going to deputize everybody here and go out and spread the word so that people should feel comfortable about coming forward if they have issues. Let's go back to the audience, sir. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
I am Justin Walters. I'm from Kalkaska here. I was an Army Ranger for 9 years, 3 years total overseas. Have PTSD and a traumatic brain injury. My big question on EMDR. I've done EMDR on inpatient and outpatient programs. I do outpatient here in Traverse City at the vet center. I was wondering how you feel about doing on an outpatient basis and on an inpatient, and how it affects like the time we go home in between the week's difference between scheduled appointments on it.
Neil, can you quickly just tell everyone what EMDR is and then just talk about the issue?
Sure. EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a trauma treatment method. The goal is to help people with PTSD process their traumatic memories, be able to make more sense of what has occurred, to reduce some of the most difficult symptoms of PTSD, flashbacks, intrusive images, nightmares, and to be able to whatever extent possible, come to terms with the emotional injuries that have occurred. What I find when I'm working with veterans or non-veteran populations when I'm doing PTSD is the most important thing, or when I'm doing EMDR, the most important thing is preparation. I want to sit down and make sure someone's ready to get into this material. That means they need to be able to relax, calm, and soothe themselves, reach out for help when they need it, know when they need to call me in between sessions. We can't move into it. They can't process this dangerous experience that has happened until they begin to feel safe with me and safe leaving my office. So that's a critical part of successful treatment.
Jonathan, you have something to add on this?
I have a somewhat controversial view that EMDR is one example of a huge and very useful category of clinical practice known as hypnotism, and I get a lot of flack from people about that, and it's really not relevant to here. I emphasize it's a very valuable practice, EMDR, and nobody should stub their toes on controversies like the one I alluded to that's a tempest in a teapot.
Let me follow up with Jackie, because there's certainly there's statin drugs and there's all sorts of surgeries that the VA may pay for when it comes to treating people, but there are other therapeutic solutions. You have yours. There are companion animals. There's hyperbaric chambers. There's lots of things that certain veterans suffering from PTSD has said that works for them. Can you give us a little insight about what you do and how you understand how it helps someone? Because for some observers, they may say, really, riding horses, that does it? They may not understand.
Well, actually, the therapy that we provide is a clinical model. It's EGALA model, equine assisted psychotherapy. And it's a team approach. It's a licensed mental health professional and an equine specialist that work together with the horse and the client to achieve the client's goals. It's solution focused, and it's 100% on the ground, so we never ride the horses. And just like Neil mentioned, our primary goal to start out with any client with PTSD is to help them to feel safe. And for some of our clients, our veteran clients, some of them haven't felt safe in 40 years. And so just to physically be able to feel what it's like to relax and to not have the heart beating fast and their blood pressure up and so forth is actually an accomplishment. We can't go any place to process difficult memories until we come to a point where we feel safe.
Well, we've already had some incredible questions coming from our live audience here. In a few moments, we're going to check in with the folks at home because they're sending in some fantastic questions as well. Before we do that, I'd like to get one more question from our audience here. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name is Kara Colburn, and I live here in Traverse City. And my question is for Dr. Shea. I read your book, Achilles in Vietnam, and was wondering if you could explain in a little more detail the difference between PTSD and moral injury, and how you're treating moral injury versus PTSD.
PTSD, as I said earlier, is a good portrait of what it looks like when those valid adaptations that you made in war or in the moment of being raped, which allowed you to survive that situation, when they persist into the life after the danger, mortal danger. Moral injury is what happens when three things are present: a betrayal of what's right by someone who holds legitimate authority in a high-stakes situation. And you can see immediately that incest, for instance, fits that description, and incest is devastating to the mental health of the target. Now, there is a second flavor of moral injury out there that's also real and it's also important, and it's similar and related, and one can lead to the other. Betrayal of what's right, same. But in the other version of moral injury, I did it. The moral agency is the person themselves, like a sniper, a military sniper, who sees that in order to do his duty, he also unintentionally but necessarily kills a child. This is a real situation that was described to me at a Marine Combat and Operational Stress Control Conference. And the third, in a high-stakes situation. The thing that is primarily lost in simple PTSD is safety, What is lost in moral injury, both flavors, is trust. When you lose the capacity for trust, it's replaced by an active expectancy of harm, exploitation, and humiliation, which blights a person's life to encounter others in that way. When you see that the only thing coming at you is harm, exploitation, or humiliation, you have a very narrow range of choices. You can strike first, and we've all met people like that. Or you can run and hide so that you don't ever encounter people. And then a third choice is relatively rare, but you see it actually in Homer's Odysseus, and that is to become a very fluent liar and to develop all kinds of false identities. Odysseus develops like 6 in the course of the Odyssey.
I want to bring Linda back in the conversation. Now, we've discussed PTSD versus moral injury, and I know you don't represent the VA. However, the VA does diagnose differently things like PTSD versus traumatic brain injury. but sometimes some of the symptoms may appear to be similar, or the outcome or the impact. In your experience, can you talk about that a little bit? Why there are differences, and is there something significant this audience should take away from PTSD versus TBI?
I will tell you that I am not qualified to speak to you about TBI, but I am going to address the Michigan Brain Injury Association in a couple of weeks with regard to PTSD as a comorbid condition in TBI. And I have not examined TBI with any great detail, but I do know for a fact that the number of those who have TBI also have a lot of PTSD issues. I would like to expand on that a little bit if I could. I want to go a bit awry, but there's an interesting new definition about PTSD. It was published in the Huffington Post, I think it was in March, by a man named David Wood. It was a 3-part series about PTSD, and the first part of it was called The Grunts, Damned If They Kill and Damned If They Don't. And it's about moral injury. And in that, he dissects PTSD. He looks at it from a different view and identifies that it's not just one glob, that it potentially has 2 components. One is the one that keeps you, on high alert all the time and you're scared to death. That is a perseveration of the fight, flight, or freeze reflex. And you get stuck in that mode and you just can't get out. That's why you can't sleep, because you're always on the edge of what's going to happen next. The other portion of that now is coming into focus as being moral injury. A guy by the name of Jonathan Shea coined that in '96 in his book, Achilles in Vietnam, for which this nation will always be grateful. But moral injury is that which exists, as he explained, as a result of a tear in your gut, a tear in your soul. You know thou shalt not kill, but you have to do it anyway, and then you have to live with yourself. And you can't stand yourself because you have violated your very own moral core. These 2 elements can exist separately, but most generally they create circles that have an overlap. So what we have is people who have both the PTSD physical response and the moral response. That, combined with TBI, is a real nightmare.
We've had a lot of great questions here, the first half of our town hall, but social media has been blowing up with people at home who are weighing in on both Facebook and Twitter who want to join this discussion. So let's go to our social media desk. Mark, Kristen, what do you have for us?
All right, thanks a lot, Mark. Well, we are keeping a close eye on both our Twitter feed and Facebook. If you would like to join in the conversation, if you would like to have your voice be heard, your questions answered, all you have to use the hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture or go to the UpNorthLive Facebook page.
Absolutely. We've had one of the people that's watching, Jan, reach out to us on our Facebook page. She says, I'm very happy you're reporting on this devastating illness. However, veterans are not the only people who deal with it, and it would be wonderful if you report on many different causes of PTSD. Also, Jennifer, she reached out to us on our Facebook page as well. She said, I was lucky enough to be at church for a presentation on this group. Thank you for the work you do.
This is an email that, sometimes when you read emails or Facebook posts, they have power to them. And I think this one does. This is a woman that is reaching out for help. She posted this, and she asked that we not use her name. She says, my husband is a police officer and a veteran. He's showing signs of PTSD. He downplays it. He says it's just stress, but I'm worried for him. In both of his careers, he has seen horrible things. I feel powerless, but I want to help him. What can I do? I'm not sure he'll listen to me.
There's a question that we've received throughout the day today, before we started, from a number of family members. Along that topic, what resources are available to family members so that, in this case, she knows, or believes she knows, that her husband suffers from PTSD, but doesn't know what step to take next. What resources are out there? What can she do to take the necessary steps to ensure he gets the care he receives? Let me start off with with Neil.
A couple things come to mind. You know, for the woman who writes in and she's concerned about her husband, as Jonathan was saying, peers can be so helpful. She may be able to contact one of his buddies on the force. She may be able to contact his chief to be able to say, hey, I'm worried about my partner. Can you talk to him? Can you encourage him to maybe go and talk to somebody? Another approach
but isn't there a problem where that could possibly go awry, where then he comes back and says, the guys at work razz me now?
You know, that's a concern, and it's a valid concern. That gets back to the question from the fire chief, that we need a change in culture from the top down, where the men and women in leadership positions that our first responders or our military personnel look up to are able to say, hey, listen, this is important, this is valid, it's okay, go get yourself some help. Another thought that I have for the woman who sends in the question is, rather than get in a power struggle with her husband about what to call this, he's willing to say, I'm having some trouble with stress. Okay, can you meet him there and say, listen, maybe forget this whole PTSD idea, maybe I'm not right about that, but you've got some stress, we both see it, how could you not in the job that you're in? Why don't we see if we can go chat with somebody about that and start there, instead of trying to push your partner, your sibling, your son or daughter into a treatment that they're resistant to, or thinking about a diagnosis that they're not sure about. Meet them where they are.
Jonathan, do you have anything to add from your experiences?
I would emphasize that here in Traverse City, there is a vet center, and the vet centers do magnificent work with people who are reluctant to go to the VA to declare themselves to be patients. And the vet center is legally empowered in a way that the VA is not, to talk to spouses, even if the veteran in question is not a vet center client, that they can help make suggestions to the spouse. The VA won't talk to a spouse unless the veteran is a patient or is registered with the VA.
You know, I've been in this business for a long time, and one of the things I've learned is that one of the most difficult things to do is to get an elected official to show up at a public event that's completely unscripted. So this is not TV. 7 and 4 News is not taking sides. We're neutral and everything, but it's worth noting when someone comes in and says, I want to be a part of this process, knowing that questions may arise that may not be comfortable. I'd like the next gentleman, please tell us who he is, his name, who he is, and then I want to chat about what he just held recently.
I'm Dan Banashek. I'm the U.S. representative for Michigan's 1st District, which includes Traverse City.
And just recently you held a hearing on, issues, related to this, HHS and so forth.
Well, we had a field hearing here in Traverse City yesterday. As a matter of fact, Linda was one of the people that testified. I'm the chairman of the subcommittee on health at the VA, and PTSD is a major problem. I worked at the VA hospital, Iron Mountain, for 20 years. I know that these military issues do not end once somebody comes home from war. And the VA, frankly, needs to do a much better job in taking care of our veterans to provide that care not only for PTSD but other disease. And I've been working through my history of working at the VA, and as a doctor, I sort of understand what that bureaucracy is like. I'm trying to work in the Committee on Health and the VA Committee to improve that situation. We just recently passed major legislation to allow veterans easier access to care close to home, and to allow veterans to have more options in their care. So, that's a step forward. The other thing I'd like to mention too is for people in the audience who have difficulty getting into the VA, like the veteran that spoke earlier, to please use our office as an advocate for them to get through some of the bureaucracy there, because that often is very frustrating filling out the forms and that, and we can certainly help with that. So I'm here to learn tonight. I think that the comments that the panelists have been fabulous. It's been a great learning experience for me and a real opportunity for the people here in Traverse City, so I'm just happy to be here.
Now, the recent news cycle hasn't been particularly favorable towards the VA in the last several months, so let's get beyond that, and you've talked about it for a moment. What are some of the steps that we can take, not just in Washington, but what can we do locally, if anything, to help the process so that our Veterans Administration works as we expect it to? Is there something, a step that we can take, whether it's our local media, whether it's our people here?
Well, you have to contact your elected officials. I mean, I hear from people all the time about issues within the VA that I can help individuals with. And the more things that I'm aware of, the more I can address it in the VA. One of the things we talked about, it was in particular PTSD, but we talked about these burn pits that occurred in Iraq in the first Gulf War, and how the VA sort of ignored that. And we've had Agent Orange issues come up in Vietnam, and that was an issue with the Gulf War in burn pits, and have our troops been exposed to smoke and chemicals, and that's not being addressed. So that's something I heard by talking to veterans and having veterans come to me to bring the issue to my attention. And I'm looking at ways to make this problem more evident. So it's a great opportunity for me to learn about issues, is to have people come to my office and tell me about them. So I'm just so pleased to be here and to hear the comments from the experts on PTSD. I'm a surgeon, not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but it's just really great that you have this facility and doing this event here today to really educate everyone about the need for peers to help and the need for us to all be looking out for the symptoms so we can counsel our family and our friends. Hey, I'm concerned about you. How can I help?
Let me follow up with Jackie. And this is, I'm not looking for criticism, but constructive comments. Probably like any large government organization, my sense is the VA is probably slow to react. So as Congressman was just talking a moment ago about the fire pits, are there steps that you're familiar with or from the people you've worked with on how we can get that feedback cycle going so the VA perhaps may respond faster to whatever they need to respond to?
I'm not sure that this is going to answer your question, but I have to say that the VA is a very large organization, and to make anything large move is difficult. But I can say in our particular area, there really is a concerted effort to meet the needs of veterans with PTSD. My colleague Jan and I did a pilot in 2012 for 3 sessions with her clients. My colleague Jan is a clinical social worker at the Traverse City VA clinic, and we gave the results to Saginaw, and Saginaw worked really hard to make this therapy available for veterans. So Peace Ranch is now in the first collaborative contract with the VA nationally. And they donate Jan's services, and Peace Ranch donates the facility and staff person to meet vets in a non-clinical setting in the open air with horses. It's a new gateway program. There's a direct phone number to it. We also work with families and provide spousal support. So what I can say is it may be a slow-moving train, but there's changes.
Linda, how do organizations like yours contribute to the process? How can we continue that feedback loop so that the VA is perhaps more informed, a little more responsive to the challenges that our veterans face?
In your last town hall meeting in Oklahoma City, you had 160 people. How many people are in this audience tonight? I'm sure we have 160. I've been trying to count, but it's hard for me to count that high. But I want to tell you, I am proud that we have this kind of showing in this small a city, And a lot of it has to do with the fact that the media has been all over this. In the last year, we've had 16 TV interviews, 8 radio interviews. We've been all over the newspaper. The media has been on it. Now, what needs to happen is every one of you in this room needs to go out and bring people with you to all the events that we have about PTSD so that you can learn and so that your friends can learn and so that they can spread the word more. But the media has been really influential in Traverse City. Thank you for being here tonight.
And for our benefit of our audience here as well as our viewers at home, we chatted a few moments ago about the number of veterans who commit suicide every single day. Again, according to the Suicide Prevention Report issued by the Veterans Administration in 2012, based on 2010 data, 22 veterans commit suicide every day. That's 8,030 a year. Pretty staggering number. Consider this. From 2001, after 9/11, a total of 4,425 people died in Iraq through today. 2,203 died in Afghanistan, and another 203 died elsewhere in places like Pakistan and so forth related to the war on terrorism. That's 6,831 people in 13 years died. We think a lot about those 6,800 people who died in 13 years, and every single year, 8,000 veterans commit suicide. One more point on that report for anyone who's actually read it, only 21 states were included in that report. It did not include California or Texas, who have the 2 largest veterans populations in the United States. So the number, presumably, is significantly higher than 8,000 veteran suicides every single year.
I know I haven't been invited, but I have to add to that, and that is, you know, those are the people that we know about. There are all kinds of people who commit suicide that you don't even know have PTSD. And that's a hallmark characteristic of PTSD. You don't talk about it. You just kill yourself. These numbers are staggering, and I'd like to make one other point, if I could. It's an interesting thing to me that this is an epidemic. There's no question about it. But the Public Health Administration is not involved in this. They are in charge of epidemics in this land. Why are they not all over this? If we have 8,000 deaths that we know of every year in veterans, why are we studying baby fat? You know more about baby fat than you know about PTSD. It's time to change our focus and look at these numbers and get engaged as a nation.
We're back to the live audience. Sir, please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name is Philip Jarvie. I live right here in Traverse City. And Dr. Benishek brought up the chemical problems that many veterans experience. And I was wondering if there is any evidence, or if it's even been looked at, the contaminated water at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and PTSD.
Anyone looked at that at all? No?
I wish they would. I wish they would.
You can join us? Step right here, sir. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name's Dean Rossler. I'm actually the elected sheriff out of Muskegon County. I'm in the area vacationing for the holiday, and I was invited here there they are, by some lovely ladies who I'm sleeping at their cabin tonight. But
don't ask, don't tell. Put away the camera.
It's to my colleague, Sheriff Bensley up here. I arrived late, so I don't know what all this discussion has taken place, but I'm curious if any of you have been involved with veterans courts within the criminal justice systems of any of the counties or, you know, other states. We just started one back in the first part of this year in Muskegon County, and already I think, you know, we're giving it 2 thumbs up as far as some of the positives we're seeing out of such a court.
And Jonathan, I see you want to speak about it, and just so everyone knows, we talk about PTSD, we're focused a lot on suicide, but also veterans who suffer from PTSD also have other issues, homelessness, high incarceration rates, the misuse of substances, substance abuse and so forth. Can you talk about this?
I want to applaud that you are working on a veterans treatment court in this area. I've been busting my chops trying to get such a thing to happen in Massachusetts. I consider it deeply shameful that we quote unquote treat combat trauma so often through incarceration. It is a disaster, usually. Unfortunately, war prepares people for life on a prison tier, which is usually in most American state prisons a war zone. They know how to do that. They know how to kill instantly if they need to survive. And this is not the right route to go. The Veterans Treatment Courts have an excellent model. I won't try and describe it here because it would take too much time, but it's very well thought out. And there is a national organization called the Veterans Court Conference, which takes place annually. And I attended that meeting this year and spoke 3 times at it, and was very glad to do that.
Neil, do you have any experience with this at all?
You know, I don't have any direct experience with veterans courts, but I know that in the civilian population, we see the same things that we see for veterans. When there are histories of PTSD, people have more trouble with violence, they have school difficulties, they have difficulties with their bosses, they have troubles with drugs and alcohol, all the same things that land veterans in court also land civilian populations in court as well. The challenge is huge.
Just to share some statistics with our audience, there are an estimated 140,000 veterans held in state and federal prisons, according to the Department of Prisons, 127,000 in state prisons, nearly 13,000 in federal prisons. Male veterans are 50% more likely to be held in prison than the regular population. So clearly something is affecting veterans, particularly male veterans. PTSD may be part of it, and it's certainly something of a scandal that we have this number of people who serve our nation and end up in trouble afterwards. So certainly we'd love to see more of the Veterans Courts approach. We're kind of running short on time here because we have to do a close for our regular TV broadcast in a moment. But before I do that, let me see if we can get a quick hit on our social media from both Mark and Kristen. And this, we're short because we're going to have to go to a break here.
All right, thanks a lot, Mark. We are getting a lot of feedback on our Facebook page and Twitter. We just ask that you keep the comments coming. Our question is, why do therapies like those with horses, unusual therapies, seem to work? That comes from Amanda in Kingsley.
And we do have a comment to pass along. Jennifer writes, please keep the spotlight on this. This is so serious, and if you've lived through this or with someone who's going through this, you know just how serious this is. We honor those who serve our community and our country with parades. Let's be there when they need our help, not just when they've earned our praise.
And we're going to have to leave it there for a moment. For those of you who are watching us on the television broadcast, we have to call it good night because we have to continue on the regular programming. However, we're still streaming live for another 30 minutes at UpLiveNorth.com. So if you're watching us on the TV broadcast, we've got to say goodnight to you as we continue on the regular programming, but we're continuing with the live stream at UpNorth.com, UpNorthLive.com. All right, so let me continue on with our audience member questions. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
Hi, my name's Annie Clark. I live in Traverse City. And I would just first like to comment, I do have a question. I am a recovering post-traumatic stress disorder person. It's taken me a little courage to stand up here tonight, but I want to emphasize for anyone who supports someone or has a suspicion that someone has post-traumatic stress, that being in a safe environment is critical. Do not push someone. I'm actually not nervous, it's just some emotion coming up, but do not push anyone. A lot of people want to support, but in supporting, you have to get tools to support. So if you want to support someone with post-traumatic stress, they don't feel safe as it is, and pushing them makes it worse. So I want to just emphasize on your emphasis on people having to first be in a safe spot, and for those who want to support, to get the tools to help someone be in a safe spot, which my husband has helped me with, given me a safe spot for 4 years. And the other thing is, it came to thought, children, you know, there are effects on children, and I think of, if I hadn't had the treatment, and I've done breath work, which is along the Peace Ranch venue, what their future is, not that the children who have experienced trauma, but who have parents who have post-traumatic stress, and particularly untreated post-traumatic stress, what the effects are that are coming forward from that, and if there are studies on that already, or results on the impact on family members, that what they're heading for.
Neil?
Sure. There's a large body of research that addresses this question. The catchphrase is, children develop emotion regulation. They develop nice, stable right brain function in the presence of other people with nice, stable right brains. You need, for children to grow up with good emotion regulation, good interpersonal skills, they need parents who have good emotion regulation and good interpersonal skills. They need to be able to, they need parents who can think well and talk about feelings well. And when parents are traumatized, they just can't do that. So it gets passed on generation to generation.
Anything to add into that, Jackie?
I'm sorry?
Anything to add?
I think that trauma begets trauma. And so I'd have to agree with Neil that parents that aren't able to parent, not only are they not able to express feelings and so forth, but they tend to behave in ways that put their children in unsafe situations.
And Jonathan, you started the evening off by saying it's contagious.
And I want to emphasize that it's not just right brain function, but the frontal lobes of the brain. Sleep is fuel for the frontal lobes of the brain. The physiology there is really clear. And that's where emotional self-restraint and ethical self-restraint are driven. And if you're out of gas in your frontal lobes because of sleep loss, you become a moral moron. You become incapable of emotional self-restraint. I personally am convinced that most of the famous, part of the stereotype of combat veterans is that they explode on the smallest provocation. And in my opinion, that is almost entirely driven by the fact that they have chronic sleep loss.
I want to bring Linda back in the discussion because as a journalist, I note how many times when it comes to a medical issue, whether it's physiological or emotional or mental, sleep always comes into the equation. You look at concussions and darkened rooms, and sleep seem to be so important. And that yet we live in an age where everybody's wired with instantaneous devices and messaging. And so have we set ourselves up perhaps for circumstances that are running counter to what we really need, that just take time off and turn the device off and lay down?
You know, I don't think there's anyone in this room that would, you know, buck that premise. But I'll tell you that in terms of sleep deprivation and PTSD, a long time ago, several years ago, Jonathan and I had a discussion about that on Skype. And, you know, not being a behavioral scientist myself, I look at things through mostly through epidemiological glasses. And when I was talking with him after I'd read his book, I boiled it down to something really simple, and I'm sure it's too simple, but what it is people who have PTSD don't talk. And because they don't talk, they can't sleep. If they could talk, and because they don't sleep, they are violent and have all of these dysfunctions. If they could talk, they could sleep. If they could sleep, they wouldn't, have these behavioral issues. So sleep really is very important.
We're back to the live audience. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
Hi, my name's Tara Wozlewski, and I'm from Elmira. I studied anthropology in college, and I worked a lot with veterans there, and now I do supportive services for veteran families. And time again, I hear veterans say that when you go to war, you're trained over and over and over again on what you're supposed to be doing, but nobody is training them on how to come home. And it's time and time again they say, I don't know how to come home. I don't know how to be this person. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. What is it as a society or a government that we can be doing for these soldiers to help them prepare to come home?
Jonathan, what do you think?
Well, I believe very strongly that we need reverse boot camp and basic untraining, and that these need to involve the whole military family, the spouse and the children, and it can't be what it is today when a veteran is heading for separation. They get a whole day's worth of PowerPoint briefings in the largest auditorium on the base, and it is utterly a waste. It's a box-checking exercise and nothing more. This is a digital native generation now. We should be getting the whole military families together in groups in, say, the month before separation, and to have small group bonding and discussion, and they will keep in touch with each other after separation, even if they're not in the same units. And the families will too. And we have no formal research on better and worse ways to separate service members. I guarantee you that the fate of both the service members and their families would be dramatically improved if we did a better job of this violent rupture in their lives, the separation from the service.
And Neil, to follow up, now we're talking about the military, but pretty much any industry, any career, any profession, firefighters, law enforcement, other first responders, anyone who deals with tragedy and danger and witnesses things that most of us don't want to see, could be similarly affected. So we would need the same kind of decompression process for them as well?
Absolutely. And again, we're talking about changing the culture, making it okay for people to be injured neurologically, not traumatic brain injury, but to recognize this is an injury that happens to our brain and our body, our whole nervous system when we get into these kinds of situations. And to make that something that we can talk about comfortably, that is assumed to be something that first responders, that service people will run into. It's just going to happen. It's just what happens next when you put people in that kind of situation. So to be able to have those kinds of conversations with the service person or the first responder, but also their families, also their kids, their spouses, to really normalize what is their day-to-day life experience.
And earlier we were a little short on time with Mark and Chris, and so in a few moments I want to check back in with them because a lot of folks at home want to continue this conversation. But before I do that, I'd like to find out what this young lady has in her mind. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name's Cynthia Murphy. I live in Traverse City, and I think my question may have been answered. I raised my hand a while ago. But my question was, would you support, or how important do you think it is to have therapy, counseling, or education for wives and families not afterwards, but in preparation for the return of their loved ones?
That's a great question. What do you think, Linda? Before a service member returns, particularly downrange, where they're perhaps in an Iraq or Afghanistan, where they're certainly seeing a lot of danger, potentially seeing danger, should we start that process with the families weeks or months before the member returns, as well as that decompression period for the member before he or she comes back from downrange?
You know, I would absolutely be in favor of that. I can't see that there would be a negative consequence from that at all. I think it would all be positive, but I would also tell you that I think we need to broaden our vision with regard to counseling services. I have discovered that, you know, in our population, it used to be that on the night that you graduated from high school, if you didn't get engaged, you know, you were the ugliest kid on the block. And then certainly if you weren't married or at least engaged and on the way to the altar by the time you got out of college, there's no hope. But now, that's not happening. Now, people wait until they're in their late 20s or early 30s before they even think about getting married. However, there's a little flip-flop in that they are still going to war in those early years, but when they come home, all of the counseling circles and all of the targets that we have are designed to help spouses and to help their children. But you know what? There are a lot of single folks who are coming home, and who has to help take care of them is mom and dad. And we have not recognized that. We need to have a way to provide them with the counseling services that are sporadically. I mean, we're not doing enough counseling, period, but there's no counseling for those parent groups. We need to take a look-see at that.
And I want to follow up with Jackie, and then if anyone else in the panel has any information on this, because what about companion animals? Because Linda talked about the people who come home without a family, the single member who doesn't have a spouse, doesn't have children. And I've spoken to veterans who need a companion animal to get them to just get out of their apartment, get out of their home. Do you have experience with the companion animals beyond horses, but something where it's a daily existence where someone has a companion animal living with them?
Sure. A lot of the veterans that come to our program also have dogs. They travel with them everywhere, cats, anything to provide that emotional regulation and companionship, the feeling that somebody's got your back. They're non-judgmental. But a big part of that is just the physiological thing that happens in the body when we touch. It releases the chemicals that help us to relax and counteract the chemicals that are released in the alert stage of PTSD.
Something to follow up on, Neil? Did you want to address it?
You know, we've focused a lot here on veterans and their needs. I have several civilian clients who have companion animals, therapy dogs. They sleep better when they have their dogs. They drive better when they have their dogs. They're less anxious. They don't get lost as much. They're more regulated when they're with their kids, when their dogs are around. It's a tremendous benefit.
You know, Jackie mentioned animals are not judgmental. I think my dog looks disapprovingly at me sometimes. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Once again, we're getting a lot of comments from our viewers at home who want to join this discussion. So let's go to our social media desk. Mark, Kristen, what do you have for us?
Thanks, Mark. We do have a wonderful conversation going on, but there are only so many minutes left of this town hall. So if you have a question you've always wanted to ask about PTSD, we definitely encourage you to ask it if you're not in our studio audience on Twitter or on Facebook.
That's right. If you're hitting us up on Twitter, you can use the hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture. We're getting a lot of stories, life stories on our Facebook page. It is a reminder of the impact of PTSD and also who PTSD affects. Carolyn writes in, I'm happy that our community is talking about trauma and PTSD. At 13 years old, I was sexually assaulted by someone within the medical field. Ever since then, I have suffered from depression and PTSD. She goes on to write,
Through my experiences, I've come to understand that the general public lacks understanding and sensitivity regarding mental health disorders. Hopefully, this is just the beginning in bringing light to these sensitive subjects. Star Walker on Facebook posted, "I have PTSD from a childhood experience. I grew up in a violent home and seen my dad shoot my cousin. I didn't realize I had PTSD until about 5 years ago. I was drinking and drugging to cope with my feelings and attempted suicide many times."
And we do have Jared from Kalkaska who reached out to us on our Facebook page. He asks, we're talking a lot more about PTSD, but are we really making progress in treating PTSD? What's the next step?
So what is the next step? What do you think, Jonathan?
I don't want to pretend to be a universal expert, but with veterans, it's peers, 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 peers. Medications can offer some help at the margins, but the core for recovery is peers.
We're back to the audience. Sir, please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name's Tim Keenan. I'm from Traverse City. I am a Vietnam veteran. Probably suffered from post-traumatic stress wounds 45 years. Wondering, in your opinion, anyone can answer this question, is there a cure for PTSD? Or do you just need to learn to manage it one day at a time? How does that work? Or are you PTSD free?
Great question. What do you think, Neil?
I wish I could say that yes, there's a cure, and everyone that we see with PTSD will be able to get them PTSD free. Unfortunately, that's not the state of the art at this point. I think of the neurological injury of PTSD just like any other physical injury. If you're in a car accident where you break a leg, you break an arm, you crack some ribs, you're likely going to get 100% better from that. They'll fix your leg, they'll patch up your ribs, you'll get some physical therapy, off you go, and you're done. For more limited trauma, that's likely what you'll be able to accomplish with your PTSD. I have clients who come in with one bad thing that happens in their adult life. And we go through a couple sessions of EMDR, 3 or 4, they're done, and they're PTSD free. They've got a small injury. But somebody who's been in a car accident that suffered massive injuries, internal injuries, bone injuries, head injuries, they're never going to be all better. There aren't enough surgeries available to make everything the way it was before. And I think we run into the same thing with PTSD, that the longer lasting the trauma, the deeper it cuts into our heart and soul, the harder it is to get back to where everyone would like to be.
Linda, do you have something to add in on this?
You know, I wish I could tell you that there's something magic out there too, and I try to scan the literature to see what's going on, and there are some exciting new things on the horizon, the new concepts, new theories, new potential treatment modalities, the possibility of separating out PTSD into a physical realm as well as a moral injury realm with certain modalities targeting just the physical symptoms and others targeting the moral. I think there is a lot of change and improvement on the horizon, and I don't think the horizon's that far off.
Jonathan?
I have seen recovery happen, so I know it's possible. William of Ockham said in the 14th century, what is possible. So nobody should ever say recovery from combat trauma is not possible. But it's often a long slog, and almost always involves, you guessed it, peers, not just people like myself.
You know, tonight we've had a lot of questions from our live audience as well as our viewers at home. And some of our members of the audience here, it's clear that this is the first time they've really talked about this issue. There are also people in this audience who haven't said anything. So we're fortunate. Tonight we have in the audience with us a number of counselors from the VA. Would you be kind enough to raise your hands? I know there's a few to my left. Raise your hands, please. Okay, so we have a number of counselors from the VA here They've agreed to speak to anyone in private this evening. We will have private rooms for you. If tonight is the night that you take the first step to resolve your issue, to find out more, to seek treatment, we will make it available for you. They are graciously going to speak to you after the program. Use this opportunity. It may be your first great opportunity to seek the treatment and care so that you put this behind you. Let's go back to our audience. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
Hi, my name is Marty Hewson, and I live in Lake Ann, Michigan. I'm a retired trauma nurse, and I'm a survivor. And my question tonight to the panel is, Michigan is a cannabis state. I would like to know your guys' position, since we just passed here in Michigan the right to declare that this condition, this illness, is now part of allowing people to get their cannabis card here in the state. I would like to know from the panel, what's your position on the treatment of cannabis as it relates to this moral injury?
Any experience with this with our panel? Jonathan?
I don't have experience with psychological or moral injury being treated with cannabinoids or with cannabis. I do want to emphasize, as far as the safety profile, it's insane that alcohol is so cheaply and readily available, not having to jump through any hoops, and cannabis in most states and most situations is still criminalized. Not even remotely like the danger of alcohol. You all know the story. Anyway, so that's all I want to say about it. I don't have.
Neil?
I do have several clients who use medical marijuana. They find it helpful for their anxiety. They find it helpful for their sleep. They find it helpful managing social situations. They find it helpful with pain. I have a number of clients who are veterans who have chronic pain, and they find their medical marijuana to be much more manageable in their lives in terms of managing their pain than the traditional pain medicines that are available.
We're back to the studio audience. Sir, please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
Sure. Excuse me. My name is Dr. Michael Wegman. I'm the president of Social Responsibility Foundation at Harbor Springs, Michigan. We have a cognitive behavioral program called Moral Recognition Therapy, and interestingly enough, it's been selected by the Veterans Affairs Office to deal with criminal justice involved veterans. My question to Dr. Shea is, what's the best cognitive behavioral program you've come across for post-traumatic stress?
I'm the wrong guy to ask about that. I really am not a big consumer of the data on cognitive behavioral therapies. I'm more, this was with criminal justice involvements. It is crucial that prison authorities, if we don't go far enough with the veterans treatment courts, and veterans do end up in prison, as I'm sure they will, for the prison authorities to develop, forgive my language, the balls to allow veterans to get together in prisons and to be as peers with each other. This scares the prison authorities to death. They're afraid they're encouraging the development of a gang. And every state that has tried it has had enormous good results with it, and then somebody panics. Oh my God. And the Royal Road to Recovery for morally injured veterans does run through their peers. I can't say that enough times in enough ways. And that is true of incarcerated populations also.
We're back to the audience. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what is your question?
My name is Marge Medell, and I live here in Traverse City. My question has to do with providing a little hope here and talking about what does a community need to do, and we talked a little bit earlier about employers. What can employers do? Because I'm sure they want to help our veterans. What can they do, and what can the community do to really start to address this problem?
Linda?
Well, there's a lot that employers can do, and I will tell you that in November, right around Veterans Day, we're going to have a conference, and one of the topics that we're going to talk about is employment for veterans. It's been a long, hard road and very difficult in the state of Michigan, and it's something that we're beginning to address. I think we're beginning to seek a greater population of veterans to come back or come to Michigan, and we are faced with the issue of trying to find ways to put them to work. One of the things that we've kicked around a lot is the fact that veterans may have difficulty working in the regular civilian sector because they have been warriors, because they have had great responsibility, because they have become used to an adrenaline rush that may be not compatible with making widgets. So self-employment is really an interesting concept for veterans. And when you work for a veteran and you are a veteran, there is, again, your principal, they understand and can help you along the way with regard to your employment issues.
We're going to do the lightning round here because I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to see if I can get at least 2 more questions in before we're done for the evening. Please tell us who you are, where you live, and what is your question?
My name is Samantha Walters. I live in Kalkaska, Michigan. I'm the wife of an OEF veteran. You mentioned earlier something about the Vet Center being a great resource in the Traverse City area. My family personally has used it for the last 5 years, and I can say that it's saved my marriage and my husband's life. The only problem is the Vet Center has quickly become overwhelmed, that it's the only resource we have. Is there any ideas to be able to bring more resources into Traverse City for veterans and their families? Not just veterans, but their families as well.
Maybe this is the part where we all look at the congressman. and he can take this message back to Washington. Does that seem reasonable? And I'm almost out of time. This is going to have to be our last question of the evening. Sir, please step on over here. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what's your question?
My name is Glenn Lewis, and I'm from the Irons area, just a little bit south of us here. I've been dealing with PTSD ever since I was a kid. You know, I was drafted at 19 and sent to Vietnam, and anyway, I've been dealing with it. And, you know, a lot of times when veterans come home, they don't know what's wrong. They just...
I'm running out of time, so you have to get a question here.
I guess I'd like to emphasize the importance of group, because that was one of the things that helped me the most. In fact, I attended group for years and years, and we found that a group member would come to the group and not speak, but yet get better. And that's because they're hearing other people say, you know, that they realize they're not alone, and that's the big problem. The other thing is that I don't believe there is a cure for post-traumatic stress. I think that you can only manage it. Manage stress in your life, you know, and I think that's the most viable thing that you can do, I think, you know, with post-traumatic stress. That's what I've done, is try to manage it.
Quickly, since we're almost out of time, like the 30 seconds, what do you think, Neil? Could there be something like a 12-step program for PTSD so it makes it more acceptable, people can gather and share?
You know, I'll second Jonathan here. It's peers, peers, peers. There are groups that are available through the Vet Center. There are informal groups of vets that get together. It's just it's a bunch of buddies who go out to lunch, who share time and a history and an experience that no one else can connect to in quite the same way.
Well, we've run out of time for this evening on this. For those of you who feel alone and isolated, you are not. There is a network, and they can help. You just need to come forward to ask for that assistance. We know that asking sometimes appears to be or feel like it's failure or defeat. It isn't. But we do recognize it sometimes takes a warrior's courage to ask for help. We certainly hope that anyone here tonight and watching at home who's suffering from PTSD and their family members have gotten something of value out of tonight's discussion, and we hope it helps put you on the path to recovery. On behalf of our panel, everyone here in the live audience, the fantastic crew of 7 and 4 News, I'd like to thank you at home for joining us for this discussion. Please make certain you watch the 7 and 4 News at 11 for coverage of tonight's town hall and all the breaking news events. And as always, we salute our military, law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, and other emergency personnel for their service to their nation and communities. I'm Mark Hyman. Good night.